I'm going to share with you 20 of my fastest growing plants. So if you're looking to fill in a space quickly in your home, then this is the video for you. There's something for everyone. And if they're fast growing for me in my cold, dark house here in Sheffield, then I promise they will be fast growing for you. And we're starting with the Tradescantia. So this is my Tradescantia tricolour, which I absolutely love, with the beige, pinks, purples and green colouring of the plant. And it's just a super bushy plant. It's a dead quick grower, one of my quickest growing plants. I would say though that it does tend to lose leaves on the stem because it can't attach itself onto soil as it grows over the pot, which is what Tradescantias want to do. But because this guy is so quick, it just tends to grow new stems and new leaves dead quickly, and it just fills it out super quick. So you don't really notice, unless you look closely, you don't really notice the bare stems and the dying leaves, to which on this plant there are quite a few, but it tends to cover it up quite well. But I took a cutting of this guy. I took a cutting about this big, so quite small, and I put it into some soil 4 weeks ago, and it has turned into this. So this shows you how quick it is to grow. All this growth has come from a single stem. One of my fastest growing plants is the Pothos Devil's Ivy. So I've got one here, little one, climbing up this moss pole, or this soil pole. This guy was a little cutting that I put onto this moss pole at the beginning or in spring this year, and it's grown all these fresh leaves up this moss pole, and it's grown all its aerial roots into the moss. I say moss, it's a soil pole, but that's a story for another day. So it's a dead quick grower, and I've got my Pothos Devil's Ivy up there, and it's grown all the way around here, come all the way down, and it's shown itself here. And it's got a massive, thick, girthy stem with quite big leaves. That must be about 4 meters, maybe? Yeah, 3 or 4 meters long, one stem. It's got another stem growing the other way as well. So they are absolutely rampant. Philodendrons have become a bit of an obsession of mine lately, even though they do tend to be a bit of a pain in the bum, like the Melanocrisis or Melanochrysum, however you want to call it. But this guy, philodendrons in general do tend to be quite slow growing. I've got a few of them. They don't tend to do much in my house, apart from this guy, the Philodendron verrucosum. This sends out probably a new leaf every maybe 2 weeks, which is quite quick really for a philodendron. Got a couple of yellowing leaves at the base here. I'll show you that. A couple of yellowing leaves at the base here. I've got this guy on a moss pole, and it's climbing, it's got its aerial roots into the moss, but it also is veering off track. So I've got a couple of toothpicks in the moss to try and guide it back into the middle. Look at the velvety leaves, absolutely stunning plant. Big fan, and it's a quick grower, so it fills in a space dead quick. A super popular plant that thankfully is quite fast growing is the peace lily. So I've got this living down on my fireplace hearth, or hearth, however you say it. And it's quite far from the window, a good 2 meters from the window, but it still seems to send out new leaves. So I can see on here already there's about 5 or 6 new leaves that have shown themselves. You can tell the new leaves because they're lighter green. So there's a few of those popping through, and I can see some new growth in the middle of the plant as well. And it is a plant that I think benefits from a fairly regular prune. The only problem with the peace lily, of course, is knowing what rhyme or reason it flowers, because I've had peace lilies for a long time now, a good few years, but I've not been able to decipher a pattern of when or why or how these flower. I must admit that I'm not a big fan of this plant. In fact, if you saw my plant ranking video that I did a couple of months ago, then you would have seen me put it in D class, I think, which is the worst class it can go in. So I want to put it in the bin really, but I know lots of people like it, so I do have to keep it in the house, even though it looks like a straggly mess. But you can't deny that the Chinese money plant is a fast growing plant. Pilea peperomoides, I think this is what the proper name for it is. So it's grown this long stem that's lost all its leaves at the base of the plant. There's nothing you can do about that as far as I can tell. But this guy is quite unusual, similar to the green orange plant, in that it lives 2.5 meters away from the window, so it's in a dark spot, especially in my climate, and it's still pushing out baby plants that you can propagate. So it seems happy enough in a low light spot. So whenever I put it in a brighter spot, bright light, it does tend to crisp up the leaves. They do tend to go black, which is why I've moved it here, and it seems much happier. I've got a little guy down here that is starting to grow a little bit funny. It's a fast grower. This is my fern, so it looks reasonably healthy on that side, but on that side it's a bit of a pancake, which is quite funny. So I've got it pressed up against, well, living on my windowsill, and it's pressed up against the window, and it wants to send out lots of new growth. It's kind of made it in a pancake shape, so I'll have to move this. But I cut this right back at the end of spring, and it's since pushed out lots of new growth. So ferns really do grow quickly. If you're constantly seeing problems with your plants that are getting the better of you and you're pulling your hair out, you're not sure what's happening, like this yellowing leaf on this Monstera albo that I recently got, then do make sure you download my free Plant Problems Troubleshooting Handbook that is linked in the description. It's completely free for you to download. It's got all the common plant problems, why they happen, and what you can do about it, all in an easily digestible format. So something to keep on your phone when something untoward is happening. So make sure you check it out, it is free. A plant that is absolutely super quick to recover from a prune back is the Dieffenbachia. So I've got 2 Dieffenbachias here. And I cut these right back to their little nubs, the stems. And I did that a month and a half ago, I think. It's pushed out lots of growth. So these are the propagations that I took when I cut it right back. And it's grown lots of roots in the vase, in the water. But a plant that doesn't really mind being cut back. In fact, it kind of, I think it benefits it because they do tend to lose their leaves. They do tend to go a little bit yellow and mushy, not really sure why. I think it might be to do with light maybe. So I've got my Dieffenbachias living under my sanitary grow lights just in front of my fireplace here. If you love a Monstera like most of the world does, and you want a faster growing version, then I recommend the Monstera Adansonii. They do tend to be a little bit temperamental. They do tend to lose some leaves, especially at the base of the plant, but they are really quick to grow, and it looks like they're sizing up very quickly. I've got this guy on a moss pole, and the size of that leaf compared to the lower leaves down here, much bigger. So it does size up dead quick, especially if you get it on a moss pole. There's lots of roots growing in there. If you like a Monstera with lots of fenestrated leaves or perforated leaves, then this is the guy for you because they're quick to grow. You're lucky to be in this video, so you best behave, okay? Alocasias I always find to be really slow growing in my house, and I think that's due to the low light. But there is one exception to the rule, Mr. Alocasia Friedeck. Come to the fore, my friend. So this guy, I mean, look how many leaves he's got. It's an absolute triumph to have more than 3 leaves on an Alocasia. Got a nice big juicy one there at the front. And look at the pattern on the leaves. Velvety leaves with a kind of white veining. Makes me weak at the knees. So this guy was living on my windowsill over winter, and it just killed off all the leaves. It went dormant basically. That's what Alocasias tend to do when they don't have enough light in the winter. But I moved it under my grow lights at the end of winter, and it's since pushed out all these leaves, which I think is pretty good going, especially in my house. I don't tend to get fantastically fast growth, but this guy coming up trumps. Are your leaves going black again? The guy that lives on my fireplace mantle here has turned out to be one of my favourites, despite all the trials and tribulations, just getting attacked by my Hoya that lives over there. But this guy, the green orange plant, which is in the same family as the spider plant, it has gorgeous orange stems with green leaves. So I did have this guy on my sunny spot next to my window just over there, and it burnt all the leaves. Doesn't like direct sun whatsoever. So that put it back in its tracks. And also it hates chlorinated water as far as I can tell. So since moving it far away from the window, 2 meters away from the window, and giving it dechlorinated water when I treat my water with water conditioner, it is much happier. So this is a plant that grows quickly despite it living in low light conditions, which is quite unusual. A plant that absolutely fascinates me is one that is growing on that wall behind me. So over here is the Pothos Devil's Ivy I was talking about earlier in that pot there, and that's grown all the way around there, the 3-meter long stem. But then living just here on the windowsill is a Hoya Lisa, and that has absolutely grown absolutely wild in this spot, and it's kind of taken over this Pothos Devil's Ivy. I'm surprised it's not killed it, to be honest, because it's absolutely got its hooks into that plant. If you're looking for an absolute jungle vibe, then I do recommend the Hoya Lisa, or any Hoya for that matter, because they do absolutely go rampant once they get their hooks in. One of my absolute favourite plants in the whole house is the purple shamrock, or Oxalis triangularis, because I just love the movement that it gives when you give it a little bit of a shake. So this guy is a super fast grower. It sends out these purple leaves from bulbs. So this is a plant that I've cut back about 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, and it's since put out all of these fresh leaves, because it was looking a little bit straggly because I didn't have it in a brightest spot. So this guy is susceptible to looking a bit rubbish at the end of summer, going into winter. So what I like to do is to force it into dormancy, which means putting it in a dark, cold spot in your house over winter, and then bringing it back to life in spring, early spring, and it should send out lots of new growth very, very quickly. I've got a video on that I'll link to right here, so check it out. So a plant that I'm jealous of because it's able to grow long, luscious locks is one that is in the Tradescantia family, I believe. It's the purple philodendron. So this guy grows as a bit of a weed in warm climates, but we keep them in pots and they just tend to grow quite rampant, very quick grower, as long as you give it the light that it needs. I've got a Sansi grow light shining over this and the croton, and since moving it to this spot, it's grown absolutely crazy. Really are weird looking flowers. So yeah, if you want a fast growing plant that will produce lots of phallic looking flowers all summer long, then I highly recommend the lipstick plant, or the Aescananthus to give it its proper scientific name. So it's got lots of deep green leaves hanging over the edge. This one's quite big, the leaves on this one. I've got another variety in my dining room with smaller leaves, and it just produces these ruby-like flowers all summer long. So this guy is producing flowers, and I'm just waiting for the little lipstick to poke through, because I bought this in spring, an abundance of flowers all over it. But I brought it home. I think it got a bit fussy about the change from where it was living to my home, which is colder and darker, and it dropped all its flowers, and now new ones are just starting to come in. So I'm just waiting for these to kind of poke their way through. But a very nice plant, I highly recommend it. I've always found Pothos enjoys, like this fella here, to be fairly slow growing. I think that's due to the variegation in the leaves. But I've had this guy maybe 5 years now or so. It's not really done much, but there is a way you can get pretty much all climbing plants to grow much quicker, and that is to stick them on something to grow up. So my recent obsession is moss poles. Well, this is a soil pole in fact. And this guy, I moved to a moss pole maybe 3 months ago, something like that, and it's already dug its roots into the soil. I keep saying moss, but it's actually soil, and it's just growing nice and tall. So eventually it's going to reach the top of that, so I'll have to put an extension on and then keep going. Hopefully we're going to get bigger leaves. So these guys do tend to veer off track a little bit, which is why I've got a little toothpick in there just to stop it from growing away from the pole. I'm not sure why it wants to do that, but relatively fast growing once you get it on a moss pole. They're happy. If you're a fan of peperomias, then you'll know that they do tend to be a bit slow growing. But if you want a peperomia that is fairly quick growing, then I recommend the Peperomia Santorini, which is a gorgeous looking plant. The interesting thing about this plant is the kind of weird growth out of the top. I think these are flowers, a type of flower, or an inflorescence maybe. The only downside with all these flowers is that they die off. You can start to make the plant look a little bit straggly, so you do have to go through and kind of take the time and just pick these off, which clearly I've not done in a while. But otherwise, fantastic plant. A plant that's really surprised me, or even shocked me, with how well it's grown in my house, because I really thought it was going to struggle due to how kind of cold and dark my house tends to be, is the pitcher plant, or the Nepenthes, which is this guy here. So I bought a Pingicula, I think that's how you say it, at the same time. It's not really done anything really. It's got new leaves growing, but very slow growing, even though it's under these grow lights. But this guy has produced a ton of pictures. And I do love the way these look. And when I look inside them, I can always see a fungus gnat inside, dying a horrible death in the digestive enzymes in the traps. So I just think these are absolutely gorgeous, and it sends out tons of these all the time. It's got a new one at the top, growing there, and they grow at the end of the leaf. So a leaf will form, and then on the end of the leaf, as an extension of the leaf, the pictures will form. So this has surprisingly done well. I keep it under this Sansi grow light, which I think has helped a lot. If it was to live on my windowsill, then it probably wouldn't get enough sun, because I do need a lot of sun to grow. Yeah, don't worry, you're in this video, calm down. So the world goes absolutely giddy for a Monstera, doesn't it? But they do tend to be a bit slow growing, particularly if you've got something like a Thai constellation or an albo, because of the variegation in the leaves. It's not able to photosynthesize as much as the kind of plain green varieties. But Monsteras are slow to grow, especially if they're quite small. It takes a long time for them to size up, but there are a few things you can do to speed up the process. One of them is giving them tons of light. So I've got a couple of Monsteras here in front of this east-facing window, so it does speed up the growth a little bit. But the other thing is to get it to climb up something. So I've got this Monstera on this moss pole here. It's dug its roots into, its area roots, and it's growing roots into the moss pole, and it's sizing up the leaves nicely. These new leaves here are nicely fenestrated with lots of slits in the leaves compared to the leaves at the bottom. So I put this on this moss pole at the beginning of this year. I think it was spring, late spring maybe, and it's put out 2 new fenestrated leaves since I did that. Hands down, my fastest growing plant has to be the Coleus. This is the champ of all fast growing plants, and I know lots of people do love this plant whenever I show it in the videos on my channel because of the nice purple and green foliage. So it's normally grown as an outdoor plant, isn't it? But in our country, it would be an annual because we haven't got the warm enough winters for it to survive. So I keep it as a house plant, and it really does brighten up the home, and it's an absolutely rapid grower. In fact, this guy was victim to 2 kids in my house mucking around and one falling on it and breaking, snapping off all the stems. But I did manage to bring it back to life, and I documented the full process in this video here, so make sure you check it out. It was a lot of fun.